So welcome to everybody. This is a webinar proudly sponsored by Deloitte. The digital capital project is the concept of a capital project that puts data at the heart of its delivery, along with information processing capabilities and related technology. We've put together a panel of experts from within Deloitte and our partner IOTICITI to discuss current digital capital project trends and explore 2 case studies. I'd like to introduce the panelists. Oh yes, I meant to tell you that it's being recorded, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. Let's move on. So first we have Guy Lembach. Well, maybe I should introduce myself. I'm Tara Rogers. I'll be the facilitator for the group. I'm a steering committee member for BC Win and a recent employee of Deloitte. So I'm a director in the capital projects group. So moving on, we've got Guy Lembach. Guy is a partner within the Deloitte's capital projects group and brings both a legal and engineering perspective to projects. He has over 20 years of practical experience in advising and supporting clients in delivering major capital projects. Next is Angela Choi. Angela is a senior manager within our value creation practice and is a leader in transformational real estate and operational strategy, and has been working closely with our partners at IOTICITI to look at how the Internet of Things can improve operational performance. Then we have Karen. She's a VP Marketing and Communications with IOTICITI and has expertise in leading high performance teams in technology and other industries. And lastly, we have Alessandra Tortida. Sorry, Alessandra. She is a senior manager in the advisory forensics and specializes in the collection and analysis of open source information. We look forward to an interactive discussion with you during this session. And with that, I will pass you on to Guy.
Thanks, Tara. Thank you very much. Do I control? Oh, I think you have to control the.
I have the control.
Right, there we go.
This is very worrying to me, but there you go. Hopefully it goes off without a hitch. Let me know if you need me to move things along.
Yeah, go. Please move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about technology, a little bit about Deloitte's view of the world, insights into project execution, particularly as it relates to the digital capital project. Start sort of with this idea of definitions of strategy, capability, and initiative. So strategy, a method or plan that chosen to bring about a desired future. So it's the achievement of a goal or solution or problem. The capability, the ability to do something. And I think when we talk to our clients and we talk more and more about not just the digital capital project, but just the delivery of capital projects, capability and capacity are always big issues that we talk about. And capability specifically, we're working with clients right now who are actually looking at the capabilities within their organization to determine what capabilities they need, what capabilities technology can take over for them. But in the new environment of the digital capital project, really how they're going to deliver projects and what capabilities they'll need. And the last is initiative. And in this example, so the ability to achieve a goal or solve a problem, leveraging technology, the ability to do something for an intended purpose. You can change the slide. So here's a real life example. So we have the ability to easily access project performance data to drive effective decision making, leverage an integrated reporting platform. So really thinking about what we want to achieve, and what's the capability. So that's the strategy. What's the capability we're looking for? To accelerate design, to enhance capability, to capital efficiency by leveraging machine learning. So we're going to use the capability of machine learning to accelerate design and to enhance capital efficiency. And then finally, the ability to ability to leverage real-time data to increase field productivity by adopting field actualization technology. So really thinking a gamut of things that we want to do, but using technology as its core to increase our capabilities and to get, to produce initiatives and to get desired results. Thanks, Tara. So here's a part of our vision of the future. I don't know that our vision of the future fits on one slide, but really talk about, no, you can go to the next one, sorry, Tara. Really going into some different technologies, and these are technologies that we're either already working with clients on, talking to clients about, helping them build business cases for, and helping them think through what they need to have in place to get it done. And the first is this integrated reporting platform, and I think I think when we think about that, we're really thinking about like a project management information system. But it's multiple disciplines integrated on a project reporting platform. So you have documentation, you have visualization of project data. One platform to include the resources, the skills, the schedules, and the acceptance criteria. And one of the ways that we're working in this space is thinking about, what decisions, are made on projects, what information is made to make those decisions, and where does that information reside? Does it reside with the contractor? Does it reside with the owner? Does it reside within finance on the owner's team? And thinking about that as a means to gather that in one space so that you can really get the information you need, make the decisions you want to make, and have the data that supports those initiatives, those decisions. Another, and I think a lot of us, have seen, building information management, BIM systems, but taking that to the next level. So 3D is a 3D model, 4D is enhanced with schedule, and 5D is enhanced with cost. So not only you building the project in a 3D model, you're also seeing how the schedule is tracking against that model and seeing how costs track that. And that can be used to assess the performance on the project, to determine if you want to do what-if analysis. Are there areas where you can accelerate or maybe even cut some costs? But really think through how that model is being used and the impact of that model to not just seeing how construction is progressing or seeing what the project will look like in a 3D environment, but actually how cost and schedule are laid on top of that. The next is really foresight through predictive analytics. And what this really is monitoring and tracking and be able to really predict how the project's going to go. There's obviously things, there's obviously tools out there like earned value management that does some of this, but using this as using the data that you're getting and the information that you're getting as a predictor for future. So, are you going to achieve your end date? Are you going to achieve your cost? What is the likelihood of achieving that end date? What is the likelihood of achieving cost? And this can include other tools as well. So field tools like drones and tablets and smart glasses, all providing the information you need to create this predictive environment for the projects. The next is digital twins, and there's a lot of definitions of digital twin. We see a lot of them. Everything is from a 3D scan of the facility. So you go in there with 3D cameras and you take a scan of your facility and you know exactly where components are related to other components. When we talk about digital twin, we're really talking about the idea, like if you think of a hydro site, if you think of a dam, within a model, within an actual model or a computer generated model, you're running electrons through the dam as opposed to water through the dam, and testing where those things are. So being able to, see what happens if you turn off a section of dam, see what happens if you increase the flow of the water, but using that digital twin. And if you do your model, if you do your 3 and 4D model right, and you build that asset correctly, it can transform into this digital twin. So it's more than just a 3D image of it. It's actually using electrons in the model or numbers in the model to show you what the asset's going to operate or could potentially operate like. And the last is one of the things that we're actually doing right now is invoice reconciliation and contract value capture. Particularly, I'm based in Alberta, and particularly in Western Canada, there's a lot of projects that are cost plus or time materials. And we see this as a way to do, invoice attestation quickly and easily and automate the process. So using robotic process automation where the contractor actually submits it to the RPA, it checks it. It says, do the hours make sense? Does the overtime hours make sense? Did this person work, more than 12 hours in a day if that's the requirement? Did they work more than 16 hours a day? Are they billing to multiple projects or multiple sort of codes so that they're actually billing 24 hours a day? Is their rate right? Is their burdens right? And doing this in an automated way. I mean, traditionally this was done 5 years ago, this was done by hand. 2 years ago, this was being done by a series of queries on the data. But now, if you set up your contract right and you set up the data requirements correct and then moving the data, it's an automated process. And what it does is it pushes out things that don't look right. And it doesn't mean that there's an issue there. It doesn't mean there's fraud. It just means that we have an anomaly in the data and it's a place to look at. And as we use learning and as we use more of this, we can start eliminating some of the anomalies for, oh, that's an anomaly, but we understand why that happens, to these are the top 5 issues that are going on with your data. Somebody's billing too many hours. Some of the numbers don't look right, but provides a very sort of quick way of pulling that data out and using this, starting to really use this effectively for certain clients, particularly in a reimbursable environment. Thanks, Tara. We'll go to the next one. So when we look at these, we look at it from a life cycle point of view, from the early part of the project through the overall commissioning and turnover. And so everything from developing your economic model through material tracking to real-time data capture to using certain tools like drones and image recognition to intelligent asset management. So using that as a means to commission and turn over. And so when we're thinking about early stages, we're thinking about the scalability of delivery. Like, does the system have the requirements? Can it be scalable to project risk and complexity? I think one of the things that we're really dealing with now is just to scale some of the projects out there. Even things like Site C, which was, $8 billion, is now $16 billion. That's not, I mean, that's a doubling on the project cost, but it's a real change in net scale. And so organizations that go into this, organizations that go into projects and think, hey, this is just $1 billion project, but now they're going to do a $10 billion project. It's not the same scale, and you have to really think through that. And so what processes change, what controls change, what data requirements change because of the scale. And then back to sort of that first capability comment, what capabilities do we need given the scale? Going through really quickly, I don't want to harp on this, but using artificial intelligence on projects. I know of organizations that are using this in the design process. So if you're going to have a repeatable design, is there a way to have AI learn those designs and start to structure it that way? Real-time tracking, getting the information quickly. We always talk about real-time, and we all know that particularly on projects, project data date ends at the end of the month, and yet it takes 25 days to produce a report. Can we use real-time tracking? Can we use real data to shorten the amount of time that we actually takes us to develop a report? And in doing that, we get this, rather than spending 25 days developing a report and 5 days at looking at that information to see what changes we make, if we can develop the report using real-time tracking in 5 days, then we have 20 days to actually affect change, to understand what the data is telling us and affect change. The integrated data platform that we're talking about, so real-time data, historic data, predictable data, using all that, using it for safety and safety validation. We've seen work where particularly in certain projects where there's camps, we can tell with pretty good accuracy where you live in the camp will actually affect your likelihood to be in a safety incident. So if you're in a group, and this is clearly, this tends to be young single men tend to be your safety incidents, but using information like that, you can actually say, okay, this group over here has a higher propensity for safety issues. Let's go give them specific training to address that. The field actualization, so actually being able to see it, using things like Google Glass to be able to say, I have an issue here. So my engineer is no longer out in the field, my engineer is back at home or back in the office, and we're not paying that additional data for that additional cost of him being out in the field. I know in some projects, the annual cost for having someone live at site is like $85,000 a year to live in a camp. And so we're saving money, but we're getting very quick access to the information, getting the right people on board. And then ultimately, as you move into commissioning and turnover, using the data you have, using the 3D models in a predictive maintenance environment. We had one client who would stop using their model at the end of construction, and they quickly realized that once they stopped using it, they actually had a data asset or an actual asset in the model, which once it was 6 months old was no longer viable because it hadn't been kept up. So understanding how you can use this information throughout the life cycle. I think that's it, Tara.
Yeah, so we we have implemented some poll anywhere questions. So for those of you who'd like to participate, if you just hold your phone up to the barcode and scan it, the questions,
open your camera.
The questions will come up, and I think if it should show if we're getting some responses, and I'm hoping Luke is on the line if this doesn't start working.
So if you missed that, if you open your camera, you can use even that QR card in the upper right-hand corner.
Right. So this is really just to assess where people are at in terms of the current technology that they're using. And I mean, maybe Guy, while the results are coming in, is it possible to implement kind of digital projects kind of partway through? So if you already have a project that's already kind of past design, is there value in integrating a digital solution, or does it have to be done at the beginning?
I think that's a bit of a case-by-case scenario. One of the issues with data and using data or the digital capital project is where you're getting your information from. And so if your contracts haven't been set up to actually request data from your contractors, request data in a certain format, in a certain means, then doing that can be expensive, or will lead to some kind of change and which will likely add costs. But what we've seen on some projects where they've done it, at that, after construction started and it's a change to the contract, we've still seen it be able to use, particularly in this idea of productivity and productivity analysis, as a bit of a game changer. Like we've seen organizations that have been able to make the change and pay for the new data requirements, through a change order, but that the information that they're getting, the speed of the information, the format of the information, actually allows them to make decisions quicker. So analyze the data, see where their issues of productivity actually are on the project or on a project site, and then increase productivity. So while there could be a cost associated with it, in this case,
if I remember correctly,
so if in this case where there was a cost associated with changing the data format, the benefits that were received far outweigh it. I think on other technologies, it becomes a bit, you have to ask the question. So there is no right answer, but typically you'd really want these things in place, even if it's just from a contractual standpoint, in the beginning. But again, on a case-by-case scenario, I think you have to ask the question, and depending on the size, scale, and where you're on the project, could all actually lead to a different answer.
Okay, thank you. So this is interesting. We do have another poll, so I'm just gonna go to that one. This one is if you're planning, to utilize any technology in the next kind of 6 months, and is this something that you and your organization are looking at? Interesting, the BIM. Right. I like to see it actually settle with the answers. It's nice to see it in real time, actually. So it's interesting that the PMIS is really in the minority here, because we're seeing a lot of kind of particularly owners and owners looking at the PMIS as the way to go. So, okay. Guy, did you want to say anything else about this?
No, I think this is interesting, and I think we've picked out 4 technologies here, but there's a bunch of different technologies, almost a constellation of technologies that are out there, and we are seeing organizations that are looking to either do a big one or just take on the small ones and identify initiatives that they can put in place relatively quickly, relatively effectively, and measure the impact of them in a pretty quick manner. I think at the end of the day, you do want to consider this, from a strategy point of view, not just use hit or miss solutions and just grab solutions off. I think that ends up being a bit of a recipe for not having the data aligned, not having the information aligned. But start with a strategy and move to initiatives that you can implement and start measuring the benefits of.
Thanks, Guy.
That's it.
So now, sorry, does somebody have something to say? No?
No, that was me just ending my commentary.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Guy. So now we're going to go to Angela and Karen. I think I can't remember who's first. I think it was Karen first.
Oh no, it's me.
That's you. Okay.
No problem. All good. We're just going to be going back and
Okay.
forth. So thank you, everyone. And yes, let's just pause here. I know you guys might be eager to start answering this particular poll question, but really excited today to be introducing IOTICITI and the Deloitte Alliance. And this is really a great use case of two organizations that really come together quite wonderfully in this ecosystem. IOTICITI and Karen will do a much better job of describing IOTICITI than I, but I can tell you that with our powers combined, we bring together quite a powerful tool for our clients. In a very small nutshell, I'll just say that IOTICITI brings an industrial IoT perspective in, and Deloitte brings a deep data and analytics capability. And together, we're killing it on the marketplace. I will say that it's quite exciting these days to see really cool technology in the industry and not just in the movies. We're actually seeing these things happen in our industry, which traditionally we know is very not tech forward. And so really great to see, and really excited to be here. So with that, let's jump into the poll. Do you use IoT in your home? I'll say I have a Nest. I just got it installed when my furnace broke down in February. And it's been wonderful being able to turn on the air conditioning from the yard. So this is wonderful. So very interesting to see, it's quite accessible now to homeowners, which is fantastic. I know I still need to install my little camera thing at my door so I can see who's delivering my Amazon package and run to the door to go get it. Oh, that's wonderful. So there's still room for folks to try some IoT in your home. It looks like we have a lot of folks who have not yet tried IoT quite yet. Interesting. So let's move to the next slide. Excellent. The resounding no might be because we don't know what IoT is. It could be very scary. We hear horror stories, and of course see I've obviously been watching a lot of movies in COVID, but the robots are going to take over, but they're not, so we're okay for now. So what is IoT, and more specifically, what's industrial IoT? And so IoT is the Internet of Things. So it's really machine-to-machine communication in real time using the internet. More and more of this now includes artificial intelligence, which is a little bit more of the thinking part, and we get into the predictive analytics. So maybe the Nest knows that I'm doesn't count now because I'm home all the time, but maybe when I eventually leave the house, it'll know that I'm not home between 9 and 5 or 9 or 8 and 6 or something, and it'll know to put the house on eco, so I'm saving money and not really turning on the furnace when I don't need to be. But it could also really be something that's connected directly or via the network to sensors that can transmit data and really be considered an IoT device. So your smartphone can actually do a lot of this stuff, but not really is an IoT device. And it can simply also just be monitoring levels remotely, lowering blinds when temperatures are higher on the south side of a building, or it can be very complex and be deployed in an integrated data platform that provides a full view of your business. And so IOTICITI and Deloitte, why would we come together? And really, it's quite intuitive when you really start to think about it, because customers want to transform their business, but don't want to manage the relationship with multiple suppliers, devices, softwares, hardwares, network integration. So we bring an end-to-end solution. So single vendor agnostic, multi-band solution is pretty rare or non-existent in the marketplace. And so partnering with IOTICITI is one way that Deloitte can help our clients transform business in the quickest and easiest way possible. And I'll hand it over to Karen.
Great, thank you. If you want to move to, yeah, thanks. Guy has done a great job of breaking down really nicely sort of the overview. How do you manage it? What does it mean? What can it do? And I think my job is to sort of illustrate the tangible specifics. What specifically, what is happening? What's real? And why is it valuable? So I'll back up a little bit to why IoT, why the Internet of Things. And generally, it just enables better and more sustainable modes of business. All those things that Guy and Angela have mentioned. It can mean this kind of benefit to any business, not just heavy industrial. There's a myriad of applications that can be, whether you're just operating a building, you're a grocery store, you're an oil refinery. Safety is important anywhere. In any business. So there's a significant contribution there. Efficiency will optimize business operations, as was outlined. And it's very clear that increased efficiency makes a better use of resources. So if you're looking for increased productivity, if you're looking to reduce waste and loss, this reduces the project impact that's negative, and also cost in many cases. So if you have targeted data, the right kind of analysis, it allows better processes and a much better use of resources over time. But it also provides data for compliance, regulators, and annual reporting, which we'll get into a little bit later. Let's see, I think also too, it's helpful to put some context around this. IoT has been around for a long time, as has industrial IoT, but really business transformation with IoT, yes, it was well underway before the pandemic, and in some instances it has served to speed it up. So post-pandemic, what we're expecting is, and the prediction is for an unprecedented growth in the adoption of new and more sophisticated technologies. So we've all learned a lot about working remotely. We've all learned about how tough it is to do business from your basement with kids running around. Post-pandemic, I think there's been a lot of learning that will help apply this in the future. So Canada is going to benefit from the America First policy for sure. The services trade will most likely benefit from bilateral harmonization. There's a move to reshore supply chain and services. We see that globally, but particularly in North America. And we're moving towards a green, digitally enabled, and the kind of trading economy that really actually requires more technology to support growth. Probably competitiveness, and as well the move to net zero and to carbon reduction. So if we look at the construction diagram here, we picked construction as a use case because it demonstrates how multiple applications and real-time data are important to operations generally. This can easily be, applied to an indoor environment without heavy machinery or industrial processes. But if we break it down to an ecosystem of what IOTICITI sees as the 4 basic motivations behind the adoption of IoT, we look at safety, security, efficiency, and sustainability. So these are all interrelated. It doesn't matter if your motivation has nothing to do with sustainability. whatever your motivation, if you are looking to build reputational capital and cost efficiency, whether it's transportation, energy consumption, production efficiency, at the same time, this very efficiency has a marked impact on the environment and potentially your company's pursuit of net zero. So whatever your motivation, both the financial and the non-financial factors will impact business. And the reverse is true. These factors will also have a significant impact on your own business's effects. So if you want to improve worker safety, decrease operating costs, make more accurate decisions sooner, make compliance easier, increase your revenue, gain a competitive advantage, let's break it down and have a look at some of those tangible examples. So there's sensors for everything, whether it's environment, weather, moisture, humidity, heat, position, angle, displacement, navigation, particular instruments, acoustic, vibration, chemical. I mean, I can go on. Pressure, flow, velocity, it's endless. It is endless what there are devices for. They all kind of look the same, to me anyway, but what they can do, it's just, it's never ending. Very interesting. There is a little bit of confusion between what is IoT and what's artificial intelligence. There's arguments even within our own company at IOTICITI if they should be lumped together. We like to differentiate them, but also present them as a package because they're both important. And we also like to layer multiple technologies. So I'll give an example. You may, for example, be using sensors to track certain vehicles and the activities on a certain vehicle, which I'll illustrate with a concrete application. Or if you have contractor vehicles coming in, you may be relying on artificial intelligence to actually figure out what's coming to the site. So what are the specific benefits? Let's look at safety and emergency response. So when 1 in 10 construction workers is injured in Canada every year, if you think about that statistics, 1 in 10, all sites, big and small, really can benefit from implementing technology. So we use IoT, sensors, and AI to ensure that safety rules are followed. So are workers wearing masks, hard hats, safety vests? We can detect. Are they smoking in areas that have flammable liquids? Are they in areas that they shouldn't be? Do they have the right access permissions or user credentials to operate specific machinery? So that goes to, the comment that was mentioned by Guy. It's those kinds of accidents. You're not only eliminating somebody's access or sending off an alert if someone's not permitted to be in a certain area, or their actual tag or card does not permit them access, or they can't start a particular machine. Where are your workers if there's an evacuation? Is there a worker down? Let's move to weather or environment. What is the ongoing air quality? This can be in a building, this can be outside. The particulate in the air from concrete being poured is extremely dangerous, as is noise levels. And so those can lead to very expensive shutdowns and also long-term health problems. So these kinds of sensors can flag a situation before it becomes a problem. Is there a storm coming? You'll know well in advance. You need to get the people down from the crane, the people that are washing the windows on your building. Is there some kind of risk of electrical storm? Let's get those folks off the building and to safety before something happens. Workforce monitoring. Where are your workers? When did they arrive? When did they leave? We hear from site managers that potentially 5 contractors arrived, but only 3 stayed. They may have no idea when the workers left, and so it becomes an exercise in accounting unless there's time-stamped entries and exits. Asset tracking. Where is your equipment? Has it broken down? Does it need maintenance? Is it moving late at night when it shouldn't be? And one simple example is a particular contractor loses 2 $600 lights every day from a site somewhere in Canada. You don't have to tag everything, but if you tag certain items, your costs and typically the cost for your customers will go way down. Security. There are so many aspects to discuss. I would just say that if you look at monitoring the site, your tools, assets, protecting your data, again, we use a layered approach, not just one technology. And let's just move to sustainability. Again, any reduction in waste and loss will contribute to efficiency, lower costs, and the sustainability of any kind of operation. So whether it's the environmental monitoring that we mentioned with particulate, or if you move to, are you working with Deloitte to produce a triple bottom line report or an integrated report? Do you have compliance requirements? You can customize the data that you are actually receiving and analyzing in order to feed that kind of process or reporting. Are you on the journey to net zero? What is your board of directors or your investor group requiring from you? So the technology used in construction is also helpful in reporting, but it can also then be used to pivot to building management, for example. So the technology that's installed floor by floor can then be used for something that is in place for operations. So very cost effective. The last one I want to illustrate in this is supply chain. We can use both AI and sensors to determine what's moving in and out of a site. So for an example of a construction site in Toronto with one of our customers, Tridel, they're working with a concrete supplier that has agreed to put the sensors on their trucks, which will actually tell you how many rotations the drum takes. If the drum goes the other way, they know the concrete is being poured out. That can be located by GPS. They know exactly where that concrete has gone, hopefully on their site. They also know the number of rotations that they have left because concrete is very time sensitive. If there's too many rotations, they will have to offload. Otherwise, they'll ruin a drum. The concrete is stale. So if there's no sensor on the vehicle, artificial intelligence can tell you the license plate of the vehicle, the type of truck, an idea of what the load is, how full the load is, and where the load is dumped. So there's all kinds of technology that can help you regardless if you're working with very close business partnerships or a whole variety of contractors that are bringing building materials on a daily basis. And the other one that I found very interesting is, monitoring dumpsters. Is it full? Are the wrong things being placed in there? Is there a person in there? Very simple applications that can make a very large difference between your efficiency and the safety on the site. Do you want to go to the next slide? This one here gives us the same information, but we like to use the wheel to show you how they all go together. So Angela, I'll hand that back to you for a moment.
Yeah, certainly. And so thank you. That's such a comprehensive use case, Karen, and really thank you for walking us through that. For many of our clients, the thought of transforming the business, and especially in the construction business, feels very, very overwhelming and very costly. But without this type of transformation, knowledge is growing that many will be less and less competitive and left behind. And so technology that's actually cost effective in implementation, being able to get the insights you need from the data that's being captured is really quite key in this whole transformation journey. And you really just got to start with something small. Start with one aspect of your business. There's oftentimes benefits in looking at dashboards, process control systems, and then you start to add additional pieces, which all really fit and integrate well within legacy ERP systems. So you really start with one element where you can have the most impact and make sure you're working through your pain points and getting through your losses and your safety issues first.
A good example of that is we have municipalities that want to start solely with monitoring stormwater ponds, both for the water level, because that's a risk, obviously, but also for public safety, because they want to reduce the number of accidental drownings. Believe it or not, it is a big issue in stormwater ponds. And so what they can do is they can aggregate current applications and add as they go. So they're bringing in the monitoring and the reporting of those elements. But at the same time, if you look at the winter months, this same client wants to monitor ice buildup as a means to safeguard their bridges. Ice jams can easily take out a bridge. And so this is another application that can be run up into the same integrated data platform. So IOTICITI Connect is our dashboard, and the control system, the process control system, can bring in or aggregate data from a whole variety of sources. So the other element too is that processing at the edge is extremely cost effective, and it allows the right decisions to be made on site right away, very quickly, especially if there's some kind of danger that's imminent. But you also don't need to transmit all of this data back to the mothership or the head office. So let's make those decisions on site, and then let's take that information only that you need to transmit to head office, and not this colossal amount that's being generated. So the wheel shows the variety of technologies that can be applied collectively, individually. It shows in the outer yellow ring, some of those elements that the technology so radar and LiDAR work together. They're a good way of keeping your sites secure. It's endless, actually, the way that you can integrate all these different technologies. We also have our own private network. So we hold significant spectrum assets. If you have a remote location, it is very cost effective to actually have a network put up on site. Again, you're processing at the edge, and then you find your means. If it means a satellite uplink, if it means different way of transferring, you're not sending a colossal amount of data to where your reporting is done and required. So really, you're blending the data that you need for those most important elements. Again, as Angela mentioned, find your pain points. As Guy mentioned, sometimes if you're running the numbers and look at the business case, it's far more efficient to have a tank level monitored in various fields way out in the countryside than it is to send a worker out there to check the levels manually. It allows your workers to do much more high value work, which again is really important to your bottom line. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. And, do let us know if you have any questions. I'm just being cognizant of time. Maybe Tara, I'll throw it back to you.
Yes, no, thanks, Angela. I think if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to just continue on because I know Alessandra's got some really interesting case studies to share as well, and then we can deal with questions at the end if that's okay with everybody. Okay, thanks. So Alessandra.
Yes, thank you. So we are going to switch gears quite a bit, and I am going to chat about the collection, the analysis, and the use of open source information. Just to sort of define terms a little bit, when I say open source information, what I'm referring to is really anything that is publicly available and accessible online. So, the list is endless, but things like financial data, corporate data, media, website data, archived website data. But sort of the most important one today we all know about is social media. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some technology that can help you collect social media in a way that is just remarkable and can really help, if collected and analyzed properly, to drive decision-making, to problem solve. And, we're all so familiar with social media, but to use it in these contexts, when we first came across it a couple of years ago, it was really remarkable. So I hope it's interesting to everyone. We use this data. Oh,
sorry.
Do we have a poll?
Yes, we do have a poll.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you want to go to the poll?
Sure.
Yeah. So it's just a let's just give it a moment to get some feedback.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know sort of how it's being used. 50-50.
Okay, let's leave it at that. It's an interesting statistic. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Sure. Yeah, so I would imagine at least some of the folks that responded yes, you know, social media may be used for marketing purposes or comms purposes, something like that. But we use social media specifically, but also other types of open source information, really for a variety of other things for clients. You know, anything from helping an organization identify risks, so reputational risks, operational risks, even financial risks sometimes. We also use it to help organizations understand what the public is saying about their brand, you know, what the uptake is with a specific program or announcement, sort of more in the government context. But we also use it for screening and due diligence purposes, so for procurement or onboarding. Really, anytime you need access to sort of up-to-date information about a topic, if you're not going to the open source to see what's out there, you may be missing stuff. So in the context of infrastructure or capital projects, you know, we've been talking about the use of technology, machine learning for things like predictive risk work, or, you know, analytics on past projects. Open source intelligence is exactly the same. It can be used across the life cycle of a project to understand lots of things. You know, anything from you know, worker safety issues, how a specific community feels about a new project. You know, internal risks, worker safety is the best example, but external risks like I don't know, maybe there are changing environmental or other regulatory requirements you need to stay abreast with. The examples sort of go on and on. When we talk about the kind of technology we use to do this work, it is all very simple. It requires, you know, it requires training and expertise, but can be set up very quickly, and it can be, you know, by tomorrow you could have insights on something you really want to understand. So we like to mention that because it is really, really user-friendly. The technology itself, though, is very, very sophisticated. It uses machine learning and natural language processing and lots of other complicated things to basically scan the internet, looking for indications of the information you want, down to very, very, very specific pieces of information. And this can be sort of spliced and diced by, you know, perhaps there's a specific region that you want to understand, or a language group, or other types of demographics. It can be really specific in that way. So this might all sound a little bit obscure. So maybe we'll go through the two case studies, if we could just flip. So these are very different examples that I'm going to chat about. The first one is some work that we did for a government entity quite recently during the pandemic. They were interested in understanding sentiment around returning to the physical office post-pandemic. And they sort of wanted to be able to use the information to make decisions about, you know, infrastructure, office space. And then, you know, as we've seen, a lot of organizations have taken this time to sort of rethink or reinvent the physical office space altogether. And so they wanted some help with that as well. So had to redact most of what's on the screen because it was confidential, but I'll just very quickly go through sort of what we did and a few of the interesting things that we found. We were able to limit the information we pulled back to specific employees from the entity we were concerned about in specific geographic locations. So the intelligence we got back was really targeted and quite actionable for the client. So we found lots of really interesting stuff on, you know, work-life balance and people enjoying working from home and all that sort of stuff that we would imagine we'd find. But we also found interesting stuff about sort of more about the office, about infrastructure. So one very small example, but one that the client was able to really take action on was a majority of the folks working for this entity used public transit to get to work pre-pandemic. And they were very concerned if they had to return to the office that they didn't want to take public transit anymore. They planned to drive to work going forward because of, health fears. And so there was a lot of discussion around things like parking access and parking spaces and waiting lists. And, it seems like such a narrow issue, but we were able to hand that over to the client, and the client could, prepare and do something about those concerns before sort of inviting staff back into the office. What I personally found sort of most interesting about this was the client had done some surveys, some internal surveys of staff. And what we found compared to what staff felt comfortable enough disclosing on these official surveys just varied completely. And so this type of data is really useful when infused with other types of data, data that we might be talking about in, the Internet of Things presentation, for example. They work really, really well together and give you a more holistic picture of what's going on. So this was sort of about how the technology can be used to understand sentiment, stakeholder opinions. If we just go to the next slide, please, Tara. This is another really interesting piece of technology. This is more focused on giving you insight into what is happening in a specific geographic location. So this is often used in like crisis events, environmental or natural disasters, other types of emergencies, but it can be also be used for a variety of other things. The way it works is it will pull back information either from or about a specific location. And that could be as big as a city or a province and as small as, a block radius. I sometimes do it with Deloitte just for fun, because you can see everyone posting sort of on the street around, and it's fun. So we used this for a client recently. They were concerned about some very important physical assets that they had in a pretty remote region. And they couldn't be on the ground, number one, because of COVID. So this has been really useful for clients during COVID when you actually just cannot be there, but you want to understand what's happening. They also couldn't be there because there were protests going on in the area and they were concerned about the safety of their staff. So, and I'll stop and say we were absolutely not monitoring protesters. We were looking at the safety of the infrastructure and nothing else. But over the course of several weeks, we were able to monitor their locations, their assets, and provide them sort of real-time updates of what was going on. So in one example, we advised them that they should erect a fence in a specific place. We advised them to turn off one of their pieces of equipment, things like that. So very actionable and helpful, and no one had to be on site to be able to get that done. So I think I will stop there just looking at the time. The one thing I will leave you with is these are just two examples. There are so many other uses for this type of external data and these technologies. And when combined with internal data, especially, it can be really, really powerful. It's a pretty exciting opportunity and sort of an untapped data source. It just sort of, it needs to be harnessed, and these tools can allow you to do that.
That's great, Alessandra. I'm going to stop sharing now. I think we just go to questions and answers. I see on my that there are some chats here. So let me just see if there are. Okay. Just legal issues, monitoring the workforce, any privacy issues. And I think this is probably for the Internet of Things and also for your open sourcing, Alessandra. So do you want to take that first, Karen, and then we can go to Alessandra about that?
Sure. Angela's answered correctly that we can take the personal information out of it. The other ability that we have is that it can be run through your own company's information system. So as much as you have all of your employees' information, it can be connected to that, and they would have consented to give that to you. But any outside information or outside of your human resources information system, all of those specific identifiers can be removed. And, there's a lot of sensitivity over facial recognition. For an example, there's a truck coming in, the license plate of the vehicle, the company, but you would not identify the people that are driving the truck. You would be not capturing that data specifically to maintain their privacy. So those are good examples.
Thanks, Karen. And that's Sandra from the open sourcing side.
Yeah, so sort of the same answer. In some cases, employees do consent to this sort of collection, right? And they are making this information public, but we don't sort of like to get into that. Really, we are almost never collecting personally identifiable information about these individuals. It's really about what they're posting, or whatever other insights we're looking for, but we're not identifying them. Other than, so this sort of other half of our practice is using these tools for investigatory purposes. In the context of financial crime and other types of investigations, there we would, but sort of a different use case.
Tara, there's one more important note, is that the client owns the data. And so we are not the owner of it, and therefore would have no right to use it unless it was de-identified. So it is owned by the client.
Okay.
In our case, yeah.
That's great. And there's definitely, it looks like there's some interest in going deeper on the open sources. Where would we direct our audience to go and get some more information on the open source in particular?
So it's starting to be a very active community online. If you Google open source intelligence, you'll find tons and stuff, but I'm also very happy to chat about it if there's interest in a further discussion.
Yeah, that's so what I can do is through the BC Win, I'll just share your contact information of the presenters, and people can talk to them directly. Yeah, putting it together, not being an expert in digital capital projects just yet, it's been really interesting to see how these different technologies are able to be used in construction and infrastructure. One of the things I think a lot of the audience would relate to is you're doing a project. What is the neighborhood saying? In terms of stakeholders, is there a lot of data online around people complaining about the noise, for example, and how it allows owners in particular to get, and even bidders, and to get behind, to get in front of the issues as they're happening before they kind of reach a peak, and then you can start putting some practical steps in place to deal with that. So I found it really, really interesting. Is there any other questions? People, feel free to come off mute and ask, or you can put them in the chat. We are up to 1 o'clock, but I have one question that I've been thinking about, and it's again around the Internet of Things. Karen, where have you seen the biggest impact in terms of the Internet of Things on the project site?
Industry, all industry, and safety. I think one of the biggest gaps that a lot of heavy industry is looking at is that most of their locations are remote, and so construction is the first to admit that they're very behind in technology adoption. You see a lot more technology in manufacturing, and I would defer to Guy as well to see what you have in your client base. But because a lot of these facilities are remote, it's the focus on safety and accidents are very, very expensive and tragic. So I think that's where we're seeing a big impact, but also just in the automation of those kinds of processes that you don't have to send staff to. You are having your workers do far more high value work. So those are the pieces that we're seeing the most impact in.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And just we'll give Suki the last question. What is the appetite for owners putting a budget towards technology such as BIM, digital twin, etc.? There's value, but practical use may not be in the culture of the organization. How do you influence this and show the value of the information it can bring? I'm really glad you asked that, Suki, because I think that's, it's all very well to have all this great ability to get this information, but if you don't have the right culture mindset, how does that work? So I'll open it up to the panel. Guy, do you want to take a first crack at that?
Yeah, Suki, in my experience, it really is, getting the strategy, but also getting the initiatives and getting the right initiatives in place and showing the value through individual initiatives. So these technologies are not inexpensive, and the time it takes to implement them sometimes is measured in months and maybe a year as opposed to in a week. So really driving down to a specific initiative that will get you there. And show the value quickly, and I think that's where I see the biggest bang for the buck and the highest adoption rate. There's a component around organizational change management, and I think traditionally engineers, as an engineer myself, just think that if we're told to do something different, we do it. But we get to a point where we just do it the way we're used to doing it. And I think the adoption that Karen mentioned in the construction industry, it's because we're just used to doing certain things. And so it's getting down to the right business case. It's getting down to the right area. It's the organizational change management are all components of getting there. I think one thing that we're seeing this in two fronts. And in some cases, traditionally, contractors were not seen as innovators because they work on very specific margins and they weren't really innovators. But we are seeing that they're adopting these tools too. And so we've seen on pretty large projects, on bigger projects, that there's almost an initiative budget that's built into the actual cost of the project to provide both the owner and the contractor the ability to suggest certain technologies that can be used, and understanding where it happens. On the example I gave earlier about the being able to use the data to improve productivity and see productivity gains. We know for a fact that the organizations that were doing that with this owner, so multiple contractors were doing it with the owner, but they actually had a competitive advantage for a short period of time with that owner, but they also had a competitive advantage with other owners because they actually learned how to look at their data differently than they had been using it. So, the appetite is increasing, but yeah, some of these can be big ticket items. So you really have to think about what's our strategy, what's our plan, what's our initiatives, and how do we do it in a cost-effective way? Because once you show the benefit, it gets easier to get the next initiative and the next initiative. So I think it's a step process, but underlying that has to be the organizational management of change, so people actually come along for the ride and see the benefit and the use as they go forward.
Great. Anything else from the panel?
I think, money talks. And if you can show the business case, this guy says, with one simple example, sometimes it's really even easy to do on the back of a napkin. And the second one is oftentimes it comes because of new compliance. And so you're either forced to, or because you see the business case, and it doesn't have to be complex. That's what we're seeing as the two most substantial drivers. And very often it's coming from those that are, at the working level. They see the opportunity and they have to find a way to run it up through management. But it essentially comes down to efficiency and money talks.
And getting the information all in one place that you can actually start to make those informed decisions, which is what I think essentially this is all about. This is about knowing exactly what's going on without and having that information just put together in a place that that people can look at and make informed decisions. So well, I'll leave it there. yes, feel free to get in touch with me or with any of the panel members. And I think I'll check with Johanna on how we're going to, if we can, share the presentation. I'm happy to do so. But I just wanted to thank you all for your time and for joining the webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure, and have a great day.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.